They say that you can't judge a book by the cover, even though we typically do. But usually when they say that, they're talking about the front cover. I'm going to talk about the back cover and how important that is to your story and how difficult it can be to come up with the material that you need for a compelling back cover. That's coming up next. As many of you know, especially if you're writers, coming up with a compelling back cover story, a compelling synopsis that draws the reader in, hooks the reader, but doesn't give away everything that you're trying to accomplish. It's a fine line that you have to walk, but it's an important fine line that you learn how to walk best. I know when I'm looking for a book that I want to read, I certainly look at the back cover. Believe it or not, as much as they say people do sometimes judge a book by the cover, even though they say that you shouldn't do that, I typically go for the back cover, or if it's a hardcover, sometimes it's the inside flap that you look at to determine what the synopsis is of the book. And then there's some books that don't really have a true synopsis. Instead, they just have maybe reviews of the book, which don't necessarily get to the heart of what the book is actually about. But that's another story. One of the things when I'm coming up with a synopsis for a story, I typically write a very basic, bland type synopsis at the very beginning before I ever even really get going with the story. Now, of course, sometimes in the course of writing, your story is going to take different turns that you don't necessarily anticipate when you begin, but you go in that direction nonetheless because it just makes sense sometimes with the way the characters develop over the course of the story, or with new characters that pop up that maybe steer your story in a different direction. And so it's important that as you let your story guide itself, you understand that that synopsis that you had at the beginning and that outline that you put together so you're not just flying by the seat of your pants could evolve over the course of the story, and you're going to have to do updates at the end. And so the recent story that I wrote, the most recent story that I finished writing, I am right now in the process of writing a synopsis. And so I'm using obviously my knowledge of the story since I wrote it, and I'm also using the synopsis, the pregame synopsis that I did that is a little bit more bland, and it's really just basically, I guess you might call it a info dump to tell me what the story is going to be about before I get started. But as you start to write the actual synopsis that you could use on your back cover, or the synopsis that you're going to use, perhaps more importantly, when you pitch to literary agents to get your book actually published in a traditional way, it's a challenge to really figure out how you want to tell your story, how you want to make people see the vision that you have for the story without giving everything away. And one of the things that you're going to have to do is really study a lot of good authors and what are they doing, especially authors in genres that you are going into or genres that you think that your book may fit into. It's important to really look at how they are telling their story, how they are teasing their story, what are the methods that they're using to really hook the reader right off the bat. Now, the front cover is going to be important, of course, and that's going to come later down the line, but you really want to think about how you're going to sell your story, your elevator pitch of sorts, to really get the reader hooked, to get your literary agent hooked, and to get your story in front of the people that are going to help that dream of actually publishing, in a traditional sense, a novel that you've put months, if not years, into developing. And so some of the tricks, I think, for me, is to really find out what is the heart of the story, what is it really all about, what is the cliffhanger that you can use to really tease that story for your reader to put that hook in them right off the bat, and how can you set it up so that when you get to the end, you have that one extra hook at the end that is going to leave them hanging off the cliffhanger that's going to want them coming back for more. So think about that as you're developing your synopsis, and just take multiple stabs at it. The first time is not always going to be the best time. You might have to do it 2, 3, 4, 5 or more times. And you might need a beta reader to take a look at it to see if you're headed in the right direction. Is this something that your beta reader would want to read the full story? So think about that, take multiple stabs at it, research, read what other writers are doing, figure out how they're setting the stage for a story that you really want to read. And some of that's going to come down to stories that you have read and maybe you forgot about what the synopsis was that actually hooked you in the beginning. read what you've seen before that got you interested, and then see if you can apply the principles of that good synopsis to the story that you have developed, so that you can get the hooks into the literary agent and your readers to create an atmosphere around a book that's going to actually sell when it comes to the bookshelf, or the digital bookshelf, as it were. So think about that. Those couple of principles will really help you to hopefully develop a great synopsis that'll help sell your book.